You might have heard you need to draw what you see, not what you know. And I understand that. It means draw what you've observed, not what you think it looks like. But you need to take that one stage further. Look and study, then convey what you see to memory. And an ideal way to do that is to sketch it, because that forces you to closely analyse what you're looking at. And you're far more likely to remember it, and not just its form, but its texture and surface reflections. Now draw what you know, because you no longer just know, you understand. And if you need them, you'll have your sketches to prod your memory. You see, there are aspects of everything we encounter that we subconsciously understand. But we need to bring that forward into our conscious mind so we can repeat the same signals and send the same messages. It's what is commonly known as seeing as an artist. And seeing doesn't just happen. It involves effort and a genuine sense of curiosity. You need to get into the habit of analysing everything around you. Keep asking yourself, what makes that what it is? Why do I know how it feels? How do I know it'll be heavy or light if I pick it up? What is it you're seeing that's telling you this is an orange? And the answer is very often light. Yes, light. And the way it's reflected. It's not so much the orange depressions you first see, but the highlights that describe those depressions. And on top of that, it's the strength of the highlights and where they appear that describes the overall three-dimensional form. Take the Evening Star mainline locomotive. Shiny and relatively smooth. Very smooth and polished to a high sheen, and definitely glossy. And the running gear has a more understated satin finish. When you look at those surfaces, you instantly know some are shiny. You don't need to think about it, you just know. In fact, you know without a shadow of doubt that they are shiny. To work out why you know that. Like the highlights that describe the dimples on the orange, you need to detect and extract the relevant information to use in your drawings. For example, if you look at a photo and it has a puddle in it, you immediately know it's water, that it's wet. Let's remove the colour since we don't have that luxury. And it's still a puddle. It couldn't be anything else. In fact, the feeling it is water might be even stronger. Of course, sometimes context plays an obvious part. If there's a pond yacht on the water, that rather gives the game away. But even with the boat removed, you still instinctively know it's water. But why? That's what you need to solve. What is it we're seeing or not seeing that is telling us this is water? Could it be the reflections we see in it? Well, they're darker than the object. Maybe that's why we know it's a reflection. In fact, it's very likely because the reflection will always be darker. That's because the sails reflect light directly to our eyes. But the water reflects light from the sails and absorbs some of it before we see it. A secondary reflection cannot compete with a direct reflection for strength. If it's something made of glass, shiny metal, or it's ceramic and glazed, well, look at those reflections. They're bright and hard-edged, and maybe those edges are the clue you need. This jug is from the old Ripon workhouse. It's a fascinating place, and I'll use some of its time-worn objects while we explore surface reflections. So let's begin with shiny. And to draw shiny, you need to know what shiny looks like. Do your research. Analyse shiny objects. Discover what I call the visual clues. The clues we instinctively know how to decode. Then, once you have them, build them into your drawings. And it almost doesn't matter how you draw. Just include the clues and you'll send the same message that you extracted from your research. These light bands running across Tom's reflection can only be ripples. No matter how hard our minds try to find an alternative solution, a ripple is the only fully qualified deduction. Think about what you're seeing and it quickly makes sense. And more importantly, so will your drawing. Now, after analysis, what we once recognised subconsciously, we can consciously understand and make use of. It adds another tool to your box of tricks. And as an artist, a creator of illusions, a teller of tales, a storyteller, they're tricks you need. These old wheels have history. They were once shiny metal, then pitted with rust, but with the working faces worn smooth by the ground they rolled on. Find the clues, build them in. I use stippling to suggest the mortar is gritty. It reflects little light, but it might have tiny quartz grains in the sand that reflect brilliant highlights. The bricks are much smoother but porous. They scatter and diffuse light, leaving soft reflected highlights around edges facing the light to describe the holes and depressions. This rust on cast iron captures the sharp crests and deep pits that you'd expect to find. At least you'd expect to see it once you begin to look around you in your everyday life. You slowly amass a mental library of objects, surfaces and tactile experiences. So imagine dragging your fingernails over this rusty surface and then drawing what it feels like. Of course, different materials and surfaces reflect light in different ways. So work out what the differences are and then use those to describe the varied surfaces. Dull rubber, aluminium or any similar metal alloy, painted or powder-coated steel, shiny chrome-plated metal. In one respect, shiny is no different from dull, or dull from shiny. You just have to work out why they look the way they do, because only then can you understand what you're drawing. Take shiny. Earlier I mentioned sharp edges. Well, they're a must-have because there is nothing on the surface to scatter or soften the light. And what about intensity? Well, because most of the light is being reflected directly into your eyes, shiny tends to be very bright. So there's a need when drawing shiny metal objects or ceramic or plastic to be brave with contrast. Depending on how shiny your object is, there must be a significant difference between the darkest and lightest values in your drawing, because high contrast is the key to success. But don't overdo it. Too much becomes unnatural and cartoonish, so you need to find the happy medium. And watch those edges too. If you soften them, you'll lower the contrast and suggest a surface such as a soft plastic. Keep those edges sharp, so you emphasise the high contrast for ultimate shine. That said, only a perfectly smooth surface will have perfectly sharp edges. Even this well-crafted aluminium-bodied Ferrari California has some areas that slightly soften the edges. Now, so far we've mainly explored shiny surfaces that reflect a lot of light. Now, this felt hat seen up close can be classed as rough. Rough surfaces both absorb and scatter the light because it's reflected in multiple directions by the many facets of a surface. So only a small proportion of that light meets our eyes, and the scattered light softens the edges of every reflection. Describe to yourself what you're drawing. Ask yourself questions. Learn to be curious. Curiosity breeds a thirst for knowledge. And knowledge ensures you understand what you're drawing. Or I should say interpreting. Because what we are creating is really just an illusion. For example, Here in the workhouse kitchen, this old brass jam pan is obviously well used. The inside is smooth and clean, but the outside is quite battered. The myriad of knocks, scrapes, dents and dimples means it scatters light and reflects little. Conversely, the rim reflects bright highlights, and the inside emits a dull glow, where this copper kettle is shiny, with no sign of that internal satin appearance. It has the same bright hard-edged reflections as the pan's rim, but the surface is smooth and polished. And look how easily you can understand each dent and ripple. And this time the reflections are very soft-edged and diffused, so less light reflected and dimmer highlights tells us it's aluminium. Or if you take away colour, it could be brass, or perhaps copper. Well, not like the copper kettle, because that's obviously shiny, which aluminium never is. But the old jam pan is similar. Take away its colour and inside it's just the same as the kettle, a satin finished metal container. So how can you show the differences? Well, personally, I'd simply keep the aluminium kettle light in tone and anything brass darker. Finally, let's try that analysis on this old policeman's bullnose lantern. There are 4 different areas of texture and reflection. 1 is a painted surface. It's dull, matte. It's chipped and showing the surface beneath. 2 is the top, where the heat of the oil burn has flaked away the paint to expose the surface rust. There are traces of undercoat, so I think the surface is lightly rusted bare metal. 3 is the bare metal rim around the lens, and 4 the glass lens itself. Let's take away the colour because we can't use that to differentiate between the parts. Now take those parts again and work out how you might emphasise the differences. 1. The painted surface is dull. The only reflection is around the back, and it's very muted and soft. And we can use the chips in the surface to connect this area to the chimney area above, and the matching light values alone should suffice. 2 has to be bare metal. That would be rusted if it wasn't being regularly dried out by the heat of the burning oil. And if we bring back the colour for a moment, you can see the reddish hue of the surface rust. It has a few very subtle soft-edge reflections, but one is a little brighter and sharper than the one on the painted surface below. So you could use that to signal the differences. 3. The bare metal around the lens is probably aluminium, or a non-rusting alloy. It has a comparatively bright reflection around the edge of its rim that is brighter than any other reflection on the body or top, and a softer reflection on the gently curving edge below. You could draw this lighter overall and smoother, with prominent highlights. And 4, the greenish hue of the glass is a useful indicator of its material, but we can't use colour as a signal. So, with colour removed, we've lost that advantage. And its tonal values are unfortunately quite similar to the rim around it. However, it does have one obvious unique feature, the very sharp-edged bright surface reflection. I think I'd want to downplay the spotted impurities in the glass and really emphasise those reflections, and even invent new ones if that helps to clarify the story. There are 2 sharp bright ones, and a broader reflection across the top of the rounded surface. And that has a darker sector to its right. I'd include that, but with care, because if you then connect it to the adjoining sector below, I fear you could create a very distracting propeller effect. Now, I'd rather fuse those 2 lower sectors together, and then, reminding myself that it's a very curved surface that is going to be darker in the lower half, concentrate on displaying the curving highlight below, and keeping that edge of the lens super sharp. Now that's essential, because it has to be visibly separate from the metal rim behind. Well, that would be the plan, but you need to be prepared to change your mind as you draw. Just keep the target in mind. A very smooth and curved surface with sharp-edged bright highlights. Always ask yourself questions. Take the time to get to know and feel what you're about to draw. Study the reflections. Here we have wood, glazed china, cast iron, wickerwork, brass, aluminium, quarry tiles, rough brickwork, and soft toweling. And as I work through the list, there's a good chance your eyes searched for each of them and probably found them, even though I didn't name what they are, because you instinctively knew which reflective quality to look for. The reflections, or lack of them, often contain the clearest descriptive messages. So work out why you can identify the various textures you see and how they differ. And before you know it, you'll be drawing realistic and instantly recognisable textures and surfaces. Well, I really wanted to concentrate on the why and what rather than the how. Do let me know in the comments if this has helped you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.